Greetings. Joseph Kursky here with you, geographer, educator, and serving on the ESRI education team. Perhaps it is fitting to focus on some of the core reasons why we are all so passionate about geographic information technologies, or geographic information systems, or geotechnologies, or location analytics. All words describing the whys of where, tools, data, and people understanding our world through these geotechnologies. We want to build a better world. That is really the fundamental reason why we're using these tools. Fundamental to doing so is fostering spatial literacy in all levels of society. And key to doing that is working in the education space. That is the core of my work on the ESRI education team, and I know it is core to what many of you do that are listening to this video right now. I also teach at several different universities. My background covers 4 sectors of society: private industry, government, nonprofit, and academia. Very pleased to be with you today. My main points are as follows. Number 1, fundamental to a healthier, more sustainable, happier future is geo-environmental literacy. Number 2, geo-environmental literacy is still rather undertaught, even in our current decade. Why is that? Number 3, how can we rectify this situation? I say we. In other words, it's not just me or my team or you. It's all of us. It is our entire community. I believe we can do this through advocating the rigorous use of GIS, spatial thinking, and critical thinking, problem solving in all levels of education and hence society. I advocate we use what I call modern GIS, platform-based, available anytime, anywhere, using field tools, analysis, real-world data, geographic inquiry, and deep thinking. Topics that scientists have studied for years, natural hazards, energy, water, climate, population change, have become subjects on daily news feeds, increasingly affecting our everyday lives. During the COVID-19 crisis, maps, dashboards, and infographics produced from GIS were viewed by the billions, helping people and communities make wise decisions and plans. Connecting students with real-world data and issues builds spatial bridges in the brain and appeals to multiple ways of learning. Students learn to transfer knowledge, to inquire strategically, to connect to their community, and to solve problems with real data. Studying environmental issues and other issues with GIS lends relevancy and real-world contexts to these issues. Spatial analysis appeals to today's visual learners. Using GIS provides a way of exploring a rich body of content and a framework for holistic thinking about the world. GIS provides a skills set grounded in content standards and fosters spatial thinking and critical thinking about data and methods. Students using GIS grapple with current, relevant, important issues in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics disciplines, social studies, language arts, and other subjects. GIS enables issues such as historical events and biodiversity to be analyzed spatially because they all have a geographic component. They occur somewhere. They change over space and time. Students see the big picture and understand how different patterns and trends are related. Students become involved digital citizens that can use technology in meaningful ways to ask the what-if questions, test hypotheses, and model scenarios. The questions stem from a firm foundation in content, the spatial perspective, and spatial skills. GIS can foster each of the Center for Ecoliteracy's 6 core ecological concepts, such as networks, cycles, flows. GIS allows variables to be input, modeled, and modified to view the dynamics of environmental processes. Hungerford and Volk, 1991, defined 9 key ecological concepts necessary for environmental education programs: individuals, populations, interactions, interdependence, and others. The NAAE's definition of environmental literacy includes 4 interrelated components: competencies, knowledge, dispositions, and environmentally responsible behavior. Because the use of GIS involves the same tools used by scientists, GIS fosters learning of each component. Teaching with GIS also connects very well, in my view, with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Let's talk about 10 ways in which GIS can be used to foster environmental geoliteracy. GIS has rapidly evolved into a cloud-based SaaS environment, software as a service, and thus is more accessible and approachable than ever. GIS tools such as Arcgis Online can be run on any device at any time using modest web connections. Some maps and tools can also be used offline. GIS can be accessed in a classroom with one computer and a projector, in a computer lab, or home office situations, and in the field. Explore a few or all of these ways that I'm describing in this video to use GIS in teaching and learning about the Earth. First of all, ask questions. Asking questions is the first part of geographic inquiry and scientific inquiry, forming the basis for knowing what types of environmental data to collect and what data to analyze, and what decisions to make. GIS does not ask the questions. Rather, it is the person using GIS that asks the questions. GIS has always been a thinker's tool. That's what I love about GIS, most of all. It's a thinker's problem-solving tool. This is the most important tool of all, your brain. Be curious about the world, about your community, about your region, about your country, about your world. How does acid mine drainage in a mountain range affect water quality downstream? How will climate change affect global food production? Where are invasive plant species living in this alpine valley? Giving students a reason to learn is powerful. Start your journey with the Arcgis Book. The Arcgis Book. This is an ebook with a whole series of chapters. Each chapter gets you into why GIS? How is it fostering communication? How can we learn about the world? How do we create effective stories? How do we do things in 3D? What about imagery and apps and so on? So the Arcgis Book is one of my favorite ways to get people of all ages into geospatial technology. Examine this series of Mapping Hour videos that demonstrate how to ask questions in the context of learning GIS tools. My colleagues and I created this set of videos, as the name implies, Mapping Hour. They're 60-minute videos that really get you into how do I build a web mapping application? How do I teach field tools like Survey 123 or Quick Capture? How do I build a web mapping application like a story map? And so on. How do I do spatial analysis? So these videos are created with two groups of people in mind. Parents saying, I've got to teach my kids now at home. How do I use some of these tools to get them thinking about ecoregions and climate and weather, water, energy, population change, and so on? And the second group was educators. Now, hey, I've got to teach online. How do I do that with these web-based geographic technologies and these data sets that are bundled with the technologies? So that's what these Mapping Hour tools allow you to do. Number 2, examine change over space and time. Earth is a dynamic planet. Environmental phenomena interact. They move, they change. Begin by comparing change over time using satellite imagery for the past 6 years, for example, using the Wayback Imagery app. The Wayback Imagery app. Let's take a look at that. This is an app that allows you globally to look at change over time. For example, urban sprawl, looking at changes in Las Vegas or any urban area, or coastal erosion in England, or, as I'm doing here, changes in water levels in reservoirs and why those changes are happening. Wow, fascinating. Coastal erosion, glacial retreat, development of dams and reservoirs, etc. Expansion of agriculture, you name it. You can look at these phenomena with these powerful tools. And this tool, like many of our apps, you can take the images from the app, which are effective in and amongst themselves, but you can also take the images or the data from the app into ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Pro, etc. Why would you want to do that? Well, so you can dig into all the spatial analysis tools and actually compute the amount of water lost in a reservoir like this, and compute the amount of urban sprawl or agricultural expansion, etc. Those are the kinds of things you could do once you take the data out of here. So the Wayback Imagery app. Another one that I love is this Landsat Explorer app. What you can do is you can create a swipe map where you're looking at changes over time with 2 different Landsat dates, for example. Wow, you've got all these, you've got 50 years of imagery at your fingertips. This is incredible, truly incredible tool. And you can look at different spectral bands. So you can teach about Landsat near infrared versus the visible part of the spectrum, and so on. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that you can do with the Landsat Explorer app. I've got some guidelines, but it's fairly straightforward. You can actually start digging into this and start investigating your world, any part of the planet, using these 50 years of Landsat images. Fascinating to be able to do this. I wish I could get excited about this. Explore changes in seasons for precipitation and soil moisture with the Water Balance app. So in this case, you've got a app that, again, gives you different layers and a global coverage, so you can look at things like soil moisture, but also precipitation. And the beauty, the wonder, the glory of web-based mapping tools is that you're getting real-time feeds or near real-time feeds. So take a look at the Sahara Desert in the amount of precipitation, and there are certain years where absolutely no precipitation fell, certain months as well. And look at the Amazon, and looking at the seasonal change in precipitation each year. And then look at, okay, right now we've got a drought in the southwest United States, for example. It shows up very clearly on here. But you can also look at snowpack and other things in this app. Another one of my favorites, looking at changes over space and time and also with human-environment interaction, is this historical USGS ESRI topographic mapping tool. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. The fascinating thing about this tool is that you can look at, again, changes over space and time. So let's say New Orleans. Let's take a look at New Orleans over space and time. And I'm going to actually raise this so you can see what I'm seeing. And that is, you've got a time stamp for these historical topographic maps. Wow. So you've got New Orleans 1932 versus today. How do I say versus today? Well, I can make this transparent, and then I can look at, well, this was before any major bridges were built across the Mississippi River there. And so how has this community changed over space and time? How has your community changed over space and time? Fascinating to be able to do that. So that is all about change over space and time. Also looking at human-environment interaction. How does the environment affect humans? Through daily weather, long-term climate, native plants and animals, landforms, the availability of water, regional natural hazards, and predominant soils. And how do humans affect their environment? Begin this investigation by the Ecological Land Units map. So let's take a look at this one. This is fascinating because the Ecological Land Units were produced with a very rigorous set of colleagues in numerous science agencies. And these Ecological Land Units were, as the name implies, they are a conglomeration of 4 different variables: bioclimate, landforms, rock type, and land cover. And it's just amazing to be able to look at, okay, let's take a look at the Sweetwater Mountains, California, and look at the Ecological Land Units. Let's look at Husamlar, Turkey, and let's look at that bioclimate and what does it look like on the ground, and what are human land uses like in these different places. Just fascinating to be able to do this. There's also many other data layers that you can actually look at related to this. So you can actually look at the Ecological Land Units and do some investigation on your own. There's also a sort of an equivalent layer for the oceans, the Ecological Marine Units. And this, again, was produced over several years of rigorous work by a community of scientists. But instead of having the water as this sort of almost uniform gray or blue tone, you've got in the Ecological Marine Units a data set of 10-kilometer spacing, and you can get a column of pH, dissolved oxygen, temperature for the oceans globally. So it's a fascinating tool to explore the oceans and all of their diversity. They're not just uniform, right? They don't have the same characteristics everywhere. And why does that matter? Why does that matter to us who live on the land? So human-environment interaction. That is a great one. Number 4, explore environmental content. Not only does GIS enhance Earth and environmental studies, but also conversely, a grounding in environmental content enhances the use of GIS. One way to begin exploring map-based environmental content is through the Living Atlas of the World. This is an amazing resource, the Living Atlas of the World. It is a compendium, an encyclopedia of, as the name implies, thousands, over 8,000 as the time of this video. You've got hurricanes, you've got traffic, weather watches, satellite imagery. This is just one tiny sliver of the Living Atlas. Notice you've got all kinds of information here, population, housing, etc. Okay? Infrastructure, environment, and so on. Okay? So you've got this global to local, so some of the layers are local, but to global set of layers at your fingertips that you can map, you can analyze, you can look at patterns, relationships, and trends. The atlas includes, as I mentioned, thousands of data layers from ocean currents to biomes, watersheds, energy production. As the name implies, it's curated, living atlas. It's continuously updated and includes live feeds from buoys, stream gauges, seismographs, weather stations, and other sources. Many maps and data layers are available through an ordinary web browser, as you see me doing here. Some require an ArcGIS Online account to use, but you can obtain a free account for educational use through the developers.arcgis.com site. Number 5, work with data. Work with data. Data skills are especially critical in the modern world due to data's increasing volume and diversity, and given its often sensitive and politically charged nature. Using GIS involves managing databases, tables, maps, feeds, imagery, vector and raster files, to name a few. Start by using ArcGIS Online. Modify map, add data, change the symbology, change the classification, note how the map appearance changes. Filter the data. There are tutorials. There are MOOCs, massive open online courses. There are lessons to help you begin. Here's some of the ESRI MOOCs, for example, and many universities offer MOOCs as well. Here are some of the ESRI MOOCs. Cartography, spatial analysis, the location advantage has to do with business, but tap into some of these. They're free. You go through these MOOCs with a community of people, so you're actually connected with real human beings with the same goals and passions that you have. The Learn Lesson Library is another way for you to continue your learning about GIS and geospatial technologies. And there are hundreds of these Learn Lessons that are available in a variety of different themes, scales, topics, and different tools, as you can see here. This is just a sample of the Learn Lessons. Be critical of mapped data. Now, a colleague and I wrote this book called The GIS Guide to Public Domain Data a number of years ago. We wanted to keep the conversation going by this Spatial Reserves data blog, Spatial Reserves. I encourage you to take a look at it because in here we review different data hubs. We look at how do I teach about spatial data quality, how do I be critical and develop critical thinking about data. So some of the strange things that you might see with imagery sometimes and offsets and missing pieces of data in vector data sets, for example. So it's all developing critical thinking. So it's data, how do I find it? And also data quality, can I trust it? And also societal issues like location privacy and these other data quality issues that I talked about. So that's the Spatial Reserves data blog. I think it's really important for students to understand data. It's very easy to make maps these days, very easy. But do you know where all those data layers came from, and can you trust them for the project that you have? Number 6, collect data in the field. A new citizen science tool was created for Earth Day 2020, focused on plastic pollution, for example. Another tool, Survey 123, allows you and your students to quickly create a field survey, collect data, map, and analyze the results. We have an equivalent tool called Quick Capture. Does some different things than Survey 123. There's another tool called Collector. Choose the most appropriate tool for your job, for your task. Data from other citizen science tools, such as iNaturalist, can be brought into a GIS environment for spatial analysis. This is one of my favorite posters on spatial analysis. It's the spatial analysis poster. And it also has a website that's associated with it. So that's a good anchor point for, okay, what is spatial analysis? Size, shape, distribution, patterns, locations, paths, making predictions, and so on. Using these tools, students understand how does pH vary along this stretch of river and why? How do tree species and tree height change depending on slope angle, slope direction, and why? Richard Louv and others have shown that if students do not receive repeated and deep immersion in natural places while young, will not value or appreciate natural places and associated issues as adult decision makers. Sobel's Beyond Ecophobia, Reclaiming the Heart in Nature Education, 1996, states that essential to helping students to understand environmental issues in distant lands is to cultivate connections to the local environment. What is important, wrote Sobel, is that children have an opportunity to bond with the natural world, to learn to love it before being asked to heal its wounds. What's important is that children have an opportunity to bond with the natural world, to learn to love it before being asked to heal its wounds. I think that's important. Number 7, GIS was created specifically to solve problems. A series of geo inquiries are short lessons that invite you to dig into natural hazards and environmental issues, each tied to a single interactive web map with no login required. The Learn Lessons, as I mentioned before, digs further into specific problems and skill building, from predicting the weather to assessing landslide and flood potential. Number 8, gain career skills. GIS was a green tool long before green was popular. GIS began in the mid-1960s, just before the first Earth Day in 1970. GIS is used on a daily basis to benefit the environment. Students well grounded in the spatial perspective are, in my view, better able to use data at a variety of scales, in a variety of contexts, think systematically and holistically, and use quantitative and qualitative approaches to solve problems. These graduates are better decision makers. View these videos. I love these videos. They're a wide variety of people, backgrounds. They're just amazing folks. The Virtual Job Shadow Explorer Careers in GIS set of videos that we produced. Also, these interviews with people using GIS every day on the job. Now, this is a column that I write. It's called Geo Inspirations. And you can see there's people at the Census Bureau, people at universities, people at the State Climatology Office, people that work in a wide variety of contexts all over the world using geospatial technology to build a better world. So I hope those are inspiring to you. Also, share your skills by becoming a Geo Mentor, geomentors.net. Go ahead and check that out. Be a Geo Mentor. Learn more about Geo Mentoring with a couple of videos I have created on my Our Earth video channel. And also, number 9, communicate your results. Sharing and collaborating is how today's complex problems will be solved. As environmental science has become more quantitative during the past century, GIS is the perfect tool in which to study processes through databases, maps, and spatial statistics. Yet, there is still room for art, creativity, and qualitative data. Start by examining multimedia story maps. Story maps. And consider making one on your own for a topic of your choice. Take a look at these story maps. Multimedia, immersive, video, audio, text, maps inside these story maps. Yes. So take a look at this. There's some tutorials on the how-to section, and there's also a sample of story maps. There are over 1.25 million story maps in existence right now as of mid-2020. So these are very popular because why? Because they're used to effectively communicate. They're effective communication tools. Maps have been used to tell stories for thousands of years, and now we've got these powerful tools at our fingertips that anybody can actually use mapping to communicate. That's a really exciting development to me. Number 10, ACT. Students engaged in GIS and environmental studies engage in the geographic inquiry process, asking geographic questions, acquiring resources and data, analyzing data, assessing and making decisions from resulting information, and acting on that information. This often leads to additional questions, and the cycle continues. However, the goal of using GIS is not just to gain skills and knowledge. Don't get discouraged, be encouraged to act. Once litter or invasive species, for example, are studied and mapped, what can be done? What can you do about it? How can a plan be implemented? Stakeholders gathered, results achieved. Discover how people are using GIS to solve problems in society in different professions in these case studies. I love this Industry Solutions page at Esri because it really digs into what people are doing in education, my field, banking, architecture, engineering and construction, natural resources, retail, sustainable development, transportation, etc. They're all They're all right here in this page. Videos, text, lots of inspirational words, and guidance. Modern GIS is a platform that you can build on, that people are building on to build a sustainable world, upon which sound environmental decision-making is based. GIS is a system. As with any system, it's comprised of many pieces. Give yourself some time for the journey, but the key is to start. People empowered with GIS and data can make a positive impact on our world. Thanks.